The sea stretched endlessly, a living skin of slate and steel, rolling beneath a sky the color of cold iron, and on its trembling surface cut the silhouette of the HMS Vigilance, a state-of-the-art destroyer of the Royal Navy, her sharp lines slicing the waves like a blade through fabric, her decks humming with the low tremor of machinery and tension. It was here, on this floating fortress of protocol and precision, that Lieutenant Aidan Shaw found himself posted, his orders crisp and formal in the envelope he clutched as he stepped aboard, the salt tang already stinging his throat and the air crackling with the energy of command. The Vigilance was not an ordinary vessel, nor did it bear an ordinary captain. Her name alone carried weight, Captain Elise Renaud, known in corridors and mess halls as the Iron Siren, a woman whose reputation preceded her like a shadow, whose service record gleamed with commendations and whose leadership was both revered and feared. Shaw had heard the stories, of course. The cadet broken into tears during a drill inspection, the seasoned chief petty officer dismissed in disgrace for minor insubordination, the night she stood barefoot on the deck during a storm, refusing to flinch as thunder cracked above her, simply to prove a point about composure. She was by all accounts beautiful in a way that unsettled, tall and lean with the presence of a glacier, eyes like polished obsidian that missed nothing, and a voice that could cut through steel, precise, cool, with an undercurrent of restrained force that seemed to wrap itself around every word like silk around a whip. When Aidan was summoned to her quarters the first evening, mere hours after boarding, he assumed it was a formality, a customary meet and greet for new officers, but the moment he stepped inside her chamber, sleek and minimal, with its burnished steel walls and a single orchid in a glass vial by the bulkhead, he realized nothing about Captain Renaud was customary. She stood not behind her desk but near the porthole, arms clasped behind her back, the sea reflected in her dark uniform, and when she turned, the room contracted with the sheer weight of her gaze. "Lieutenant Shaw," she said, and the syllables of his name felt suddenly fragile like glass on her tongue. "You came from the Argus, yes?" He nodded, already tense, his spine finding a stiffness he hadn't known it possessed. "Yes, ma'am." She studied him for a moment, a long moment, as if weighing not just his service record but the sum of his moral character. Then nodded once, barely. "You'll find things aboard Vigilance are different. We do not tolerate sloppiness, hesitation or sentiment. You are expected to operate not just with precision but with devotion. Are you capable of that, Lieutenant?" And though he felt the question reach deeper than it should into something unspoken inside him, he answered without hesitation, "Yes, ma'am." The smallest curve of a smile touched her lips then, not warm, not cruel but knowing, as if she had already foreseen the arc of his transformation, and with a nod she dismissed him, and the door slid shut behind him like the sealing of fate. In the days that followed, Shaw discovered that her rule was absolute. Drills began before dawn with punishing intensity, every uniform thread, every gesture, every line of code reviewed with merciless scrutiny. She patrolled the decks in silence sometimes, her boots echoing like a metronome of fear, her eyes flicking with surgical awareness, and yet, even as exhaustion gnawed at him and every muscle ached, Shaw began to feel something else blooming beneath the rigidity. Admiration, yes, but something stranger too, something magnetic, something perilous. It wasn't just her control, it was the strange tenderness with which she delivered her discipline, the way she corrected without shouting, how her hands never trembled, how her presence alone seemed to reorder chaos into clarity. He watched her during storm drills as she stood unmoving at the helm, rain soaking her short black hair, face bare to the wind, and he felt the draw of gravity, not of affection. He didn't dare call it that, but of need, the way one might need to kneel before something vast and beautiful and terrible. And slowly, under her gaze, under her command, something in him began to bend, no, align, with a rhythm not his own. She began assigning him tasks directly. Classified navigation checks, security overrides, tasks requiring discretion and silence. "Report to me in person," she would say, always that same measured tone, and soon reporting became ritual, standing at ease before her while she walked slowly around him, sometimes speaking, sometimes just watching, until he wondered if she could see the flush behind his ears or the subtle tremble in his left hand. And then came the night that changed everything, the night she invited him in after hours. Her voice softer on the intercom yet laced with steel. "Come to my quarters. Bring nothing but your orders." The door slid open to a dimmer room this time, the orchids still blooming, the scent of salt heavier, the silence deep and enclosing. She stood barefoot again, her uniform jacket off, revealing the simple line of her undershirt and the powerful restraint of her posture, and she didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her voice was quieter than he had ever heard. "Tell me, Lieutenant, do you know the difference between obedience and surrender?" He hesitated, words lost in the tightening of his throat, and she stepped closer, close enough that he could see the faint scar near her collarbone, the faintest softening in her gaze. "Obedience is protocol," she said, reaching out with one gloved hand to adjust the fold of his collar. "Surrender is offering yourself to the discipline willingly. One can be commanded. The other must be chosen." And as her hand lingered, not tender, not cruel, just impossibly certain, Aiden Shaw knew without knowing why, that he was already choosing. Not out of romance, not lust, but because somewhere between her discipline and her silence, he had glimpsed something sacred. After that night something shifted, not publicly, not in any way the crew could name or point to, for Captain Renaud remained as controlled, as precise, as untouchable as ever, but for Aiden the fabric of his reality had changed subtly, like a compass nudged a few degrees, altering the course of everything. Her presence now haunted the margins of his day, not as a distraction but as an invisible current pulling him deeper into a world of sharper expectations and subtler rules, a world where discipline was no longer a function of duty, but a language, a code of silence, of posture, of eye contact held just a second too long. She no longer summoned him with formality. Sometimes she'd appear beside him on the bridge without warning, speaking softly near his ear as if their understanding was private, as if the rest of the ship had faded into fog. "Your decisions have improved," she whispered one evening as the sea churned black beneath them, "but your breathing quickens when you're uncertain. Correct that." And it wasn't a reprimand. It was a gift, precise and intimate, as if she were tuning an instrument and he was grateful to be adjusted. Her corrections became rarefied rituals, a nod here, a tilt of the head there, a single gloved finger placed against the back of his hand to still his motion, and each one left a heat beneath his skin he couldn't explain, a crackle of awareness that outlasted her touch. In her quarters, their meetings took on a strange cadence. She would have him stand while she read reports in silence, the only sounds the hum of the ship and the faint rustle of paper, and sometimes without speaking she would have him kneel, not as punishment but as calibration, as she put it once. "You seek containment," she said, her voice without judgment. "Most men pretend they want freedom. But some of you, some crave the lines that hold you still." And he did not deny it, could not, because it was true. In the cage of her expectations he felt paradoxically safe, as if her control offered him something he hadn't realized he needed. A structure for his chaos, a channel for all the noise inside him that had, until now, had nowhere to go. She never touched him improperly, never overstepped the invisible code they both seemed to intuitively follow. And yet every moment alone with her pulsed with the tension of an undone collar, of breath caught on the edge of command. Then came the week of the typhoon, 3 days of sleepless crisis, where the sky fractured with lightning and the sea rose like mountains, and the vigilance was tested beyond design, crew scrambling in slick corridors, systems failing, alarms screaming like animals in pain. Shaw was everywhere, managing triage, restoring systems, shouting orders, his voice raw, but always in the corner of his eye he saw her. Captain Renaud, unshaken, soaked and shining with rain, moving like the storm bent around her, not through her, a fixed axis in chaos. And when the worst had passed and silence returned like a bruise across the deck, it was her voice that anchored them. She addressed the crew not with platitudes but with a command: "You endured because you were prepared. Preparation is the quiet form of love we show this ship. Never forget that." And something in Shaw broke at those words, because he realized then that her severity, her silences, her exacting standards, they weren't cruelty. They were devotion. And later that night when he brought her the casualty reports, she did not ask him to kneel. She simply looked at him long and level and said, "You did not falter." He felt his throat tighten and she tilted her head. "Do you want to understand what it means to serve more completely?" she asked, and the question carried no threat, only an invitation. "Yes," he whispered, and she stepped closer, took his hand, not with softness but with purpose, and placed it palm down on the table between them. "Then trust me," she said. "And obey absolutely." He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The room felt suspended in time, the storm outside now only wind and memory. That night she had him sit while she read to him. Not commands, not reports, but lines from a naval code centuries old. Passages about honor, about dignity in silence, about the strength of obedience when freely given. She read slowly, her voice like the low toll of a bell, and when she was done she told him to sleep on her floor at the foot of her bunk, not out of subjugation but proximity. Command is a solitude few understand, she murmured in the dark. But you might. And as he lay on the narrow mat, spine straight, her breathing steady above him, he realized he didn't feel dominated. He felt chosen. The days grew longer with new drills, each one a thread tightening the fabric of the ship's discipline, and with each challenge Lieutenant Shaw found himself not only meeting Captain Renaud's expectations but anticipating them, learning the subtle signs, the flick of her eyes, the set of her jaw, that signaled not just orders but a deeper test of his resolve and understanding. The crew, meanwhile, whispered in corridors about the growing tension between the cold iron will of their captain and the quiet young officer who seemed to navigate her storms with a mix of awe and something akin to reverence. And it was during a long watch on the bridge, the night sea black and endless beyond the reinforced glass, that the unspoken reality between them crystallized into something undeniable. Elise Renaud, the woman whose name carried the weight of command, who demanded absolute obedience, who tolerated no weakness, allowed no softness, had begun to rely on him not just as an officer, but as a confidant, a presence she did not need to explain, a calm in the eye of her own internal tempests. The world outside was a vast chaos of shifting tides and unseen threats. But inside the bridge, under the low hum of electronics and the faint pulse of radar, they existed in a bubble of silence, the only sound the soft tapping of fingers on controls and the occasional measured breath. She stood behind him, her hands resting lightly on his shoulders, her fingers cold but grounding, and he felt the paradox of her dominance, a force that was at once unyielding and strangely protective. As she leaned close to whisper a correction about the angle of approach for a routine maneuver, her breath brushing his ear in a ghost of a touch, sending a jolt through him that was both electric and disorienting. Focus. She breathed, the word simple but charged, and he obeyed, heart pounding not from fear but from an aching, a yearning to live up to this impossible standard of perfection she embodied. This woman who ruled the ship and perhaps the depths of his own soul with the same unbreakable will. Outside, the stars gleamed cold and distant, but inside the bridge, beneath the captain's command, Aidan Shaw was learning that discipline was not a chain but a key. One that unlocked the most unexpected doors. The door to trust, to vulnerability, and most quietly to tenderness hidden behind the iron mask of authority. And so it went on. Each day a lesson, each night a revelation, each glance and gesture a page in the silent book they were writing together aboard the Vigilance. A book filled not with words, but with the language of power given and received, of strength tested and affirmed, and in that delicate balance between surrender and control, Aidan found not just a duty to fulfill, but a strange, profound freedom, one he had never imagined possible beneath the captain's command. The Vigilance cut through the vast, indifferent ocean with unwavering resolve, the crew's routines a metronome of efficiency and silent respect, but beneath the steady rhythm of commands and responses, an undercurrent of unspoken tension wound tighter between Captain Renaud and Lieutenant Shaw, a tension that neither acknowledged openly but that infused every interaction with an electric charge. It was during the long hours of navigation through a deceptively calm stretch of sea that Renaud finally allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability, a brief slip in the impenetrable armor she wore to command respect, and in that fragile instant Shaw saw the woman beneath the uniform, not the iron captain but the human heart beating with the weight of responsibility and the loneliness of command, a heart he felt both privileged and burdened to hold. She spoke quietly, almost hesitantly, sharing a memory of a past mission where failure had nearly cost lives, her voice steady but edged, with a softness he'd never heard before, and in that sharing the divide between them narrowed to a fragile bridge built on trust and understanding, the kind of trust that could only be forged through hardship and absolute honesty. From that night forward, their relationship deepened beyond the formal protocols of rank and discipline, evolving into something profoundly complex, equal parts mentor and student, commander and devoted subordinate, protector and protected, as Shaw found himself willingly surrendering not just his obedience but his guarded heart, and Renaud, in turn, began to reveal the cracks in her otherwise impervious facade, the moments where the weight of command became a lonely burden she could share only with him. On deck under the stars, When the ship lay quiet and the hum of machinery softened to a whisper, they shared long conversations that skirted the edge of propriety, words woven with a delicate balance of power and vulnerability, where every glance held the promise of more and every silence was a confession. She taught him not just the tactics of naval command but the art of self-control, the strength in restraint, and the courage to face the unknown not with fear but with unwavering resolve. And through it all, the Vigilance sailed steadily onward, a silent witness to the unfolding of a bond that defied convention, a bond tempered by discipline but softened by an unexpected tenderness that neither could deny. And in that complex dance of dominance and trust, authority and affection, Shaw discovered the paradox at the heart of their connection, that to be truly strong under the captain's command, one must first learn to let go completely, to place faith in the hands that lead, and to find freedom not in rebellion, but in submission to a will far greater than one's own. The weeks aboard the Vigilance turned into months, the endless expanse of ocean a silent backdrop to the evolving relationship between Captain Elise Renaud and Lieutenant Aidan Shaw, their connection marked by a profound complexity that defied the rigid protocols of naval life. Their interactions, once formal and strictly professional, had softened into a nuanced dance of mutual respect, subtle challenges, and quiet intimacies that existed in the spaces between orders and reports. In the exchanged glances during morning briefings, in the unspoken understanding conveyed by the tilt of a head or a brief, steadying touch to the arm during tense moments, Shaw had become not only the captain's trusted officer but also her confidant, the one who could read the unvoiced demands behind her stoic mask and meet them with steady resolve. And Renaud, for her part, balanced the iron discipline that earned her the crew's unquestioned obedience with rare moments of gentle kindness, reserved solely for him, moments that revealed the woman beneath the uniform, a woman shaped by sacrifice, fierce loyalty, and a quiet longing for connection in the isolated world of command. During a rare shore leave in a small coastal port, they shared a night away from the watchful eyes of the crew, a night where the layers of rank and expectation fell away beneath the soft glow of lanterns and the distant crash of waves, and in that fragile vulnerability Shaw glimpsed the depths of Renaud's strength and the tenderness she rarely showed, as their conversation wove from shared fears and regrets to whispered hopes and the promise of trust beyond the ship's steel walls. The boundaries of their relationship blurred as they navigated the delicate balance of power and vulnerability, discipline and desire, each step forward taken with cautious reverence, knowing that the lives they led were governed by codes far older and stricter than their own hearts. And through every challenge the Vigilance faced, from rough seas to unexpected threats, Shaw and Renaud stood united, their bond a silent but unbreakable thread woven through the fabric of the ship's mission, a testament to the paradox that true command was not about dominance alone, but about the courage to open oneself to trust, to surrender, and to the unexpected tenderness that grows in the shadows of control.